Are you looking for an exciting and aggressive new gambit to try out? Stick around, and by the end of this video, you'll have a new way to crush your opponents. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in here with e4, e5, king's pawn opening, very standard and common setup. And our first surprise right here, right now, we are playing d4. So this exact position is known as the center game. Well, you can kind of guess why with the 3 center pawns right here. Now, of course, most people are simply going to take the pawn. And if they don't take that pawn, by the way, it's not generally that good for them because you get to take their center pawn and then they don't have a center pawn. So that works too. But when they do take, what you want to do is play f4. Now this is actually not the way most people play this line. And in this center game position, a lot of people prefer knight f3, bishop c4, just developing moves. However, I'm going to show you something a bit more unknown, but with a much higher win rate. Alright, so we play f4 here, and black will often play knight c6. They're going to try to support this pawn because that is their extra pawn now. They're up a pawn, they want to hold on to it, it makes sense. Now we want to apply some pressure to it with our knight. They will generally defend with the bishop, and okay, we can kind of see we're not going to be able to get that pawn back. You know, they have the bishop and knight defending it. It's very well covered. We don't have another good way to attack it, nothing forcing at least. So what we're going to do is kind of forget about that pawn for the time being. We're going to play bishop d3 and develop. And there is a reason we are going to d3, but we will get to that in a few moves. Alright, so generally, black likes to just continue developing. Let's give them a move like knight f6, very normal developing move. You'll see that very often if you get this position. Now what you want to do is castle. Alright, and then large majority of the time they're also going to castle, and believe it or not, that's the mistake for black. Alright, they get to this position, they're already in a tough spot because you play... Alright, and this is why you wanted the bishop on d3, so that when you get the chance to play e5, you're aiming the bishop at h7. Very nice setup here. So what happens stunning majority of the time is they put that knight in the center of the board, and what you get to do is known as the Greek gift. Okay, so you go bishop takes h7, check. They don't have much of a choice here. Either they take or they go king h8. Your move is the same either way. They may as well take the bishop. And you go knight g5, check. And now here they are very limited on options. Alright, they move the king or they take the knight. Now if they happen to take the knight with their queen, you take back with the pawn. Obviously you gain good material there, so completely winning, you'll be happy with that. Now if they move the king, it's also going to be very good for you. So the only place they can move the king to not get checkmated would be g8. Now ideally they'll make a bigger mistake and they'll try to run out to g6. In this exact position though, you can play f5 check, and notice your bishop back here guards the knight. So the king has nowhere to go except to h6. And again, notice the bishop guarding the knight. So you're all good there. You have time to go queen g4, which is a very simple threat to play queen h4, checkmate. And there's not really much they can do to get out of it. Right? They are very stuck here. You're gonna get to checkmate them soon enough. Back in this position, if they try going to h6 to start with, what you want to do is bring your queen up to d3. You're threatening queen h7, mate in 1, and there's not really an amazing way to stop that. So what most people would probably do, probably at this point, they're just going to take the knight and hope for the best. And again, if you get them to give up their queen for a knight, you're doing great. Let's see, maybe they could try g6 to block your queen, but here's the nice part, you get to go this way now. Come on over to h3 check, king moves, queen h7 checkmate. Now, if we give them the best option here, king g8, the nice idea with the Greek gift tactical sequence is you get to play queen h5 and threaten mate in 1. The best move for them, and I'm not even kidding, their best move is to take the knight with the queen. If they do that, again, you're happy. You get the queen for the knight. You are up material. You're going to be in a very good spot. Now, most people are not going to be, super eager to give up their queen because, that's their queen. They are more likely to play rook e8 in the hopes of running away with their king. Which is a nice try because if you were to play queen h7 here, they're going to run. And then there's not a forced checkmate or anything after that, so they have a chance. However, and this is something nice to remember for these sequences, instead of going to h7 since the rook moved, you take the pawn on f7 instead. Alright, and that forces the king to h8. Now you come back with your queen to h5, forcing king g8. Now you go to h7, forcing king f8. Now you go queen h8 check, forcing king e7. And the difference between doing this now after you took on f7 instead of doing it to begin with, is now when you go queen g7, there's no pawn on f7 blocking you from the king. So now you're check, and it's a checkmate. There's no way out. So all that, in 15 moves, you've won the game, just off this very little known gambit from the center game. So I'm going to take you back a good bit here. Let's go back to, say, this position. So knight c6, by far most common. Knight f3. I'm going to explore some other possibilities here because, of course, not everyone is going to play just right into that perfect line. Some people actually, instead of playing bishop c5, they make it a little more fancy and they'll play bishop b4 check. All right, and now you do have to be a little careful here. You don't want to make the wrong move, but there is a very simple way to do this. So we're going to say you play c3 to block the check, and they are definitely going to capture the pawn, which is kind of nice for you. This isn't bad. It helps you develop your knight. And then to take this a step further, most people actually swap the bishop for that knight. And the large reason why is if they don't, then later on that knight hops to the center of the board after you've castled, and that's just a fantastic knight. So they want to get rid of it while they have the chance. So they'll take, you take, and this isn't a great pawn to have, but it's not going to cause you any problems. They aren't attacking it. In this position, most people play d6 to try to prevent e5, but I will say, if they play knight f6 right here, I would encourage you to go ahead and play e5 and bishop d3 and get that whole setup going on the board here. So they'll play d6 most likely to prevent e5. That's okay. You go bishop d3, they go knight f6, you castle, and here's the deal. If they castle, this is starting to look familiar, don't you? You get to play e5. e5, let's say they take, you take, they go knight d5. We have the same tactic from earlier, the Greek gift exchange. So we take with check, they take, knight g5, it's the same pattern. Once again, either they give up their queen or they run their king back here, and they probably still should give up their... They're not going to be able to escape. It's going to be a gruesome finish to the game for black. So we'll go back a little bit. Castling on move 9 is quite the mistake. Instead, what they should be looking to do is play bishop g4. It's a better try. Alright, so now you have to be a bit more careful because the knight is pinned, but there is a nice way to go about this. What you want to play here is actually just e5. See, there are a lot of familiar themes and patterns with this opening that make it pretty easy to get down and remember. Bishop is generally on d3. You try to play e5. It's not any different in this one. So what's going to happen is they're going to take, you're going to take, and then there are two common ways that black could go about this. Generally speaking, they'll either move their knight to the center of the board, or they'll get greedy and grab the pawn. Now, if they move to the center of the board, it's quite interesting. You just play bishop c4, and now you have two pieces attacking this knight. And this is really, really nice, because if they do the human thing and just move the knight anywhere at all, we're going to say b6, because that's what most people do. Now you have a really nice tactic. Welcome to pause the video to try to find it. It's a nice tactic here. What you want to do is you play bishop takes f7 check. If they don't take back, great. You just gained a pawn for nothing. Good for you. When they do take back, the idea is that you go knight g5, discovered check from the rook, and a double check. And, if it's a double check, they must move their king. And I don't know where their king is going. Worst case scenario, they go back to e8 and you just grab the bishop and your position looks fantastic. If you're fortunate, they're going to go king g8 and you're set up for another nice tactic, which you're welcome to pause the video here again and try to find it. This one is way tougher than the previous tactic, but quite nice, so I'm going to include it here. The very difficult move to find right now would be rook f8 check. Very sneaky idea. So if they take with their queen, you have queen b3 check, and there's no way to avoid checkmate. The king is stuck over there. They're going to block the check a few times. You're going to take all their pieces and checkmate. Now, if they take with their king, the idea is you play queen f1 check, and now they're in a terrible spot. Their best move is actually to go queen f6 and give up the queen. The thinking is if they move their king, you just have queen f7, and that's mate. So that's just unfortunate for them. You're going to be winning this game pretty quickly. So very nice tactic there. Now let's go back a few moves. That's what you do if they play knight d5. You get to set up a nice tactic with bishop c4. But a lot of people will also get greedy and grab that pawn. And this is where we get to do what we call a counter pin. Alright, they have a pin going on over here. They're attacking a pinned piece. So we're going to pin their knight to the king. And they don't have a lot of options here. If they try to guard the knight, we're going to take it anyway. We actually have two pieces attacking it. If they try to move the knight, then they are making an illegal move. So good for them, I guess. Now, realistically, their best try is going to be queen takes bishop, so they, they're thinking they get something for it. It's their best try because if you take with the queen on e5, they're totally fine. You don't have any play after they block the check. They're going to be okay. If you go knight takes knight, attacking the queen, attacking the bishop, you're completely winning. Because once they move their queen to safety, which they probably will, you just take the bishop, and it's going to be either with check, or it's going to be something like this. We'll say they go queen e4. You're still going to take the bishop, because the queen can't take the knight. The knight can't take the knight, or else you get their queen. So maybe they take our queen. We take here with a check. We take here with a check. And we're just up, we're up a bishop. We're up a bishop. Technically, they have 2 extra pawns. One of them is a doubled pawn. But also, you have a bishop. Lots of space to use it. You're up a piece here, essentially. Very nice position that you would be quite happy with. Now, I want to take you back to this position over here. So, knight c6 is not the only move people have attempted to play here. I've also seen c5, which makes sense. If you want to absolutely lock this pawn down in the center, support it with another pawn. That makes sense. Now, there is going to be a slight difference in this continuation. So we're going to start the same with knight f3. They go knight c6. However, this time we are not going to play bishop d3. While it would still be an option, I'm going to recommend bishop c4 instead. When you see the pawns like this, just the way it's all been set up, the light squares are incredibly weak. So your bishop gets to sit here on c4 and keep an eye on f7. You can already be looking at potential knight g5 ideas as the game goes on. It could happen as soon as the next move. It's something to keep in mind at least. But that bishop is absolutely dominant where it is on those light squares. So you want to take full advantage of that. And generally, black would like to be able to play d5 if your bishop is here at some point in the game. But that's never going to happen. You have total control over it. Now, realistically, they will play d6, because if they play knight f6, it walks into e5 or maybe even knight g5. So they're more likely to play d6 to try to hold that off. Now here, I'm going to say you just castle, and normally here, black will pin the knight. Nothing to fear. Quite the opposite. You have a very neat tactic here. Again, a similar theme from earlier. You're welcome to pause it to try to find it, because the tactic here, bishop takes f7, check. If they don't take, retreat the bishop, you're up a pawn, go you. If they do take, you go knight g5 check, and here the thinking is if they move their king out of check, as many would, you go queen takes bishop, and you're doing great. Or if you're fortunate, your opponent will look at this and go, I take knight, you take queen, they take queen, and it'll even out probably. Except that when you take the queen, it's with a check. So then they have to move their king out of danger, and then you take the bishop. I think we know who's winning here. I think you're going to be pretty happy with this position, so we're not going to dive much deeper into that, but that is how you would like to approach it. Back on move 3, if they play c5, you want to go with knight f3 and put the bishop on c4 instead for the future f7 ideas. This is a very interesting opening. There's one more continuation to show here, one more common line. So knight f3, bishop c5, we're back to this, bishop d3. What if they just don't play knight f6? Because that seems to be a problem. What if they have seen this before and they decide they want to try to hold off e5? Some people have tried d6 here to try to stop e5, which it doesn't really, which we're going to find out. Let's say we castle here, and then there are a couple of common options. We'll look briefly at both of them. Some people will throw in bishop g4, and they'll pin that knight, which is rather annoying, but there's a nice convenient way to get out of this. What you want to do is actually just play knight on b to d2. So you want to connect your knights and strengthen them. They don't really have any threats here. Most people play knight f6 now. And here you go h3. If you're fortunate, they'll retreat to h5 and let you trap their bishop. That would be quite nice of them. However, most people are going to take. You take back with the knight you just brought into the game, so your position didn't get hurt. Meanwhile, they lost a good bishop. And to continue it, this is where they will castle. And now you get to go e5, takes, they move the knight, and we are in familiar territory with the Greek gift. And from here, I think we know what to do. We're going to end up winning. We've seen this already. So let's go back a little bit. Very common continuation there. If they don't play bishop g4, they may go ahead and play knight f6. And here, e5, it's not the right time for e5 yet, mostly because they haven't castled. So if you were to play e5 right now, they'd be okay. What you want to do, a lot of people like to play sort of a waiting move with h3 or a3. I'm going to tell you to be a bit more active than that and go with queen e1. So here's the idea. When they castle, and the large majority of people do castle here. What you're gonna do is you play e5, they'll take, you'll take, they move the knight to the center. And now you get to go bishop takes, king takes, knight g5 check. It's the same idea, just your queen is coming to a different square this time, to h4, but it makes no difference whether your queen is on h4 or h5. Both squares attack h7, and it's going to be really difficult for them to get out of. In fact, once again, as has been the case throughout this video, they should just give up their queen instead of getting checkmated. So very, very nice continuation here. Even if they try to get out of it with rook e8, you just go queen h7, and now you actually have rook takes f7 with a nice checkmate to finish them off. So a very fast win in this gambit. Very, very useful stuff here. I completely encourage you guys to check this out, give it a try, see if you like it. So there you go. Congratulations on learning how to play this exciting gambit. If you're interested in learning how to punish the Sicilian defense, by the way, then click the video that is appearing on the screen somewhere over here. So there you go. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.